Welcome to the 2025 housing market, where the Florida dream is starting to look a lot less like paradise and a lot more like a financial trap. You know the brochure version. Endless sun, no state income tax, palm trees swaying over brand new stucco subdivisions with names like Harbor Cove and Coastal Estates. For years, Florida was sold as the ultimate escape from high-tax states and cramped city apartments. But what if that escape hatch is quietly snapping shut? You feel it every time your home insurance quote comes back double what it was 2 years ago. You feel it when your condo association announces a special assessment that costs more than your car. You see it in the growing stack of for sale signs along the same streets that were bidding war arenas just a short time ago. Some risk models are now whispering something almost unthinkable. In certain flood-prone, storm-battered, or ultra-speculative pockets of Florida, the downside is not a gentle 10% dip. It is a possible 40, 50, even 60% wipeout if insurance, storms, and outmigration all line up the wrong way. That is not a correction. That is a controlled demolition of household wealth, set in motion by the same forces that lured millions here in the first place. Today, we are taking a hard, unfiltered road trip through 10 Florida cities where the housing story is shifting from boom to something far darker. We are going to look at places where insurance is becoming the real mortgage, where investors are quietly trying to exit, and where locals are wondering if they will be the ones left holding the bag when the music stops. If you want real talk about what is actually happening to housing in America, not just the sales pitch, hit subscribe to Discover the Nation. Tap like so this investigation reaches more people. And tell us in the comments what you're seeing on the ground where you live. Buckle up. The sunshine might be bright, but the storm underneath is very real. Number 10. Lakeland. You start your journey in Lakeland, halfway between Tampa and Orlando, in the middle of the state and in the middle of a story that almost no one saw coming. For years, Lakeland was the bargain line on the map. Logistics warehouses, quiet subdivisions, and a cost of living that felt downright reasonable compared with the coasts. Then the pandemic hit. Remote work exploded, and people who could not afford Tampa or Orlando started looking at Lakeland like a cheat code. Builders noticed. So did investors. By 2023 and 2024, the cranes moved in. New subdivisions spilled out along the highways. National home builders rolled out master-planned communities with amenity centers, resort-style pools, and price tags that looked more and more like the cities Lakeland used to undercut. Now the bill for that rush is arriving. Listing data through mid-2025 shows inventory in the Lakeland metro up sharply from a year ago. Homes that once sold in a weekend are now sitting for a month, then two. Price reductions, which used to be rare, are showing up on listing after listing as sellers test the market, get silence back, and then start trimming. A big part of the problem is math. Many of the new homes were priced not for local incomes, but for buyers escaping even higher-priced metros. That influx has slowed. Some who moved in early are already moving again, chasing jobs or cheaper costs in other states. Meanwhile, the locals who keep the warehouses, hospitals, and schools running cannot justify six-figure mortgages plus rising insurance on wages that have not kept pace. Rentals tell the same story. Single-family rentals that were part of the institutional buying spree are hitting a ceiling. Tenants are doubling up, moving back with family, or relocating further out where rents are lower. That leaves owners either offering discounts or watching properties sit vacant. Lakeland is not a beach town, and it does not make national headlines. But in 2025, it might be one of the clearest examples of Florida's middle market getting stretched past its limit. When a place built on affordability stops being affordable, something has to give.
Number 9. Jacksonville. You head north toward the state line and roll into Jacksonville, a city that feels less like a resort and more like a sprawling, working port. For a long time, Jacksonville was Florida's underappreciated giant, a big military presence, a major logistics footprint, and miles of relatively affordable neighborhoods made it a quiet favorite for families who wanted Florida without South Florida prices. Then, the secret got out. Between 2020 and 2024, remote workers and transplants from Georgia, the Carolinas, and the Northeast flooded in. Investors followed, snapping up older homes on the west side, townhouses in the south side, and everything near the beaches. Prices moved up fast, faster than local incomes could comfortably support. By 2025, the cracks are visible. Regional listing data shows total active listings up strongly from last year. Pending sales have cooled. Days on market have stretched from mere weeks to well over a month in many neighborhoods. The most aggressive pandemic-era pricing is not sticking anymore. Sellers who try are meeting silence, not bidding wars. At the beaches, where investors banked on short-term rentals and endless tourist demand, the numbers are especially harsh. Insurance premiums have skyrocketed. Some carriers have dropped coverage entirely, forcing owners onto expensive last resort policies. Those costs shred profit margins for small landlords who bought at top-of-market prices. In parts of the urban core, another problem is surfacing. Crime and infrastructure concerns are influencing buyer decisions. Families who stretch to buy in emerging neighborhoods are now looking at their tax bills, their insurance, and their surroundings, and quietly deciding to leave altogether. The result is a market caught between two stories. On one side, a city that still sells itself as an affordable big metro. On the other, a set of numbers that say the affordability edge is fading. For buyers, Jacksonville in 2025 is less of a slam dunk and more of a caution sign. For recent buyers who assumed endless appreciation, it is a reminder that no market gets a permanent pass from gravity.
Number 8. Orlando. You swing back toward the center of the peninsula and the billboards start to change. Theme parks, timeshares, vacation rentals. Welcome to Orlando, where the housing market has lived for years on one idea. The magic never ends. During the pandemic, that idea was turbocharged. Families decided if they were going to work from anywhere, it might as well be near the happiest place on earth. Investors piled in, especially around Kissimmee and Davenport, buying new builds with the promise of year-round bookings in rising values. For a few years, it worked. Home prices jumped. Vacation rental revenue soared. Entire neighborhoods became known more by their listing platforms than their street names. By 2025, the fairy tale is showing its seams. Travel is still strong, but it is not infinite. Budget-conscious families are cutting trips, staying fewer nights, or opting for cheaper accommodations. At the same time, thousands of new short-term rentals and second homes that launched during the boom are all chasing the same guests. Data from multiple vacation rental analytics firms shows occupancy rates down from their peaks, even as nightly rates have flattened or declined. Behind the scenes, that means cash flow is shrinking while costs are climbing. Insurance on Central Florida homes has jumped. Some owners have seen their policies double or triple. Property taxes, reappraised at peak valuations, are squeezing budgets further. For investors with adjustable rate mortgages or thin margins, the math is turning against them fast. Many of those homes are quietly crossing over from nightly rentals to long-term leases or straight sales. That pushes additional supply into an already crowded for sale and for rent market. In the suburbs around major highways, you can scroll through listing pages of nearly identical houses, each with some new price cut or concession. For local families who simply wanted a normal house near a normal job, the past few years have felt like competing with a global investor class. In 2025, that dynamic is reversing. The investors are blinking first. Orlando reveals an uncomfortable truth. When a housing market is treated like a theme park, eventually the ride stops and someone is stuck paying for the maintenance.
Number 7. Sarasota. You drive west until you hit the Gulf and roll into Sarasota, a coastal city that has spent the last decade selling itself as the calmer, more refined alternative to the chaos of Miami and Tampa. For years, this was the pitch: white sand beaches, arts and culture. A slower pace of life with just enough luxury to feel special. Retirees, snowbirds, and remote workers from the Midwest and Northeast all bought in. Prices climbed steadily at first, then surged as out-of-state money arrived with cash offers and big expectations. Now, in 2025, The same ingredients that powered that boom are turning into Sarasota's biggest risk. The first pressure point is insurance. Waterfront and near-waterfront properties in Sarasota County have been hit with premium hikes that do not feel like minor adjustments. Some owners are getting quotes that rival or even exceed their mortgage payments. Others are being told that certain protections are no longer available at any reasonable cost. For people on fixed incomes, that is not a line item. That is a breaking point. The second is regulation and maintenance. Condo associations, especially in older towers near the water, are under intense scrutiny after statewide law changes tightened inspection and reserve requirements. Boards are hiring engineers, commissioning structural reports, and scheduling repairs that can no longer be postponed. Those projects are funded through special assessments that easily run into the tens of thousands of dollars per unit. For many retirees, those surprise bills are devastating. Listings in older waterfront condos are rising. Units that once sold in days now sit for months while buyers run spreadsheets on insurance, HOA dues, assessments, and taxes, then decide to look further inland or in another state entirely. East of the interstate, newer master-planned communities are feeling their own strain. Builders who raced to meet demand during the boom years are now offering incentives, interest rate buydowns, and quiet price cuts to move inventory. Resale owners who thought they could beat the builder on price are learning that large builders can drop prices faster than any individual seller. On paper, headline median prices may still look strong, but if you track days on market, discounts, and concessions, the softening is obvious. Sarasota still looks like paradise at sunset. In 2025, though, buyers are asking a different question. Not just how pretty is the view, but how much hidden risk comes with this view, and how long until the next bill arrives.
Number 6. Cape Coral. You follow the coast south and cross the bridges into Cape Coral, a maze of canals, stucco homes, and a price chart that once looked like it was headed straight to the moon. Cape Coral was one of the standout winners of the pandemic migration. Remote workers, retirees, and investors all fell in love with the idea of a boat in the backyard at a price that seemed cheap compared with coastal California or New York suburbs. Builders carved new subdivisions out of former wetlands, and for a while, every new listing felt like an instant win. Prices did not just rise, they exploded, outpacing local incomes in turning ordinary houses into speculative chips. Then, Hurricane Ian hit. The storm tore through southwest Florida, ripping off roofs, flooding streets, and leaving behind staggering repair bills. Insurers responded by raising premiums, narrowing coverage, ordering new inspections, or walking away from the region entirely. Many owners ended up with the state-backed insurer of last resort at higher costs and stricter conditions. By 2025, Cape Coral is stuck between boomtown and rebuilding zone. Homeowners who rebuilt did so at far higher costs than expected. Insurance and construction expenses devoured savings. Property taxes reset to boom-time values, even as some neighborhoods still show visible scars and empty lots. Investors who bought multiple homes at peak are under real pressure. Carrying costs have soared, rents are not keeping up, vacancies last longer. Some are trying to sell, but the buyer pool at today's prices and insurance quotes is much smaller than when the hype was loudest. Lenders are quietly tracking delinquency in the most exposed pockets. Listings of storm-impacted and storm-repaired homes are elevated, and buyers are cautious. They ask hard questions about flood history, elevation, roof age, and insurance availability. Some walk away as soon as they see the insurance estimate. Cape Coral is a vivid example of the new Florida reality. The question is no longer just what a house is worth, but who will insure it, at what price, and for how long. When those answers get too extreme, prices have only one way to move, to find equilibrium, and that adjustment is far rougher than the glossy listing photos let on.
Number 5. Fort Myers. Just across the river, Fort Myers tells a slightly different chapter of the same story. Before the storm, Fort Myers was an affordable Gulf Coast hub, a place where retirees, service workers, and families found condos and small homes that did not require lottery winnings. Investors loved it too, buying units to rent seasonally or year-round to snowbirds who filled the restaurants every winter. Local listing data from regional MLS feeds showed steady, predictable appreciation rather than wild coastal speculation, which made the city feel safe. When Hurricane Ian made landfall,
Fort Myers took a direct hit. Entire neighborhoods flooded. Mobile home parks and older communities were devastated. Beachfront areas saw destruction that will take years to fully unravel. Insurance claims piled up. Some owners were made whole. Others discovered gaps, exclusions, and limits they never understood until it was too late. Public adjusters and contractors became part of everyday vocabulary. By 2025, the housing market here is a patchwork of optimism and distress. Rebuilt properties with shiny new finishes are asking top dollar, backed by updated codes and fresh inspections. Right next to them, damaged or partially repaired homes linger, offered at discounts that sometimes are not deep enough to account for risk, future premiums, and uncertainty. Online portals like Realtor.com and Redfin show long days on market for many of those listings. Insurance is the quiet villain again. Premiums for older homes have surged, especially for properties with older roofs or lower elevations. Some carriers are unwilling to touch certain zip codes at all. Properties that would once have attracted a broad spectrum of buyers now have a much narrower audience willing to take on the cost and the possibility of more storms. Vacant lots, cleared after the storm, are also part of the picture. Builders bought some, betting on a fast rebound and better margins on brand new construction. Others sit unsold, a reminder that not every destroyed structure is automatically reborn as something more valuable or more insurable. For locals, the choice is brutal. Sell into a wounded market and lock in a loss, or stay, pay rising costs, and hope that future storms and policy changes do not make things even worse. Fort Myers is the kind of place where the national media flashes disaster images for a few weeks, then moves on. But for the people whose life savings are tied up in these houses and condos, the storm never really left. It just moved from the sky to the spreadsheets, from weather alerts to renewal notices and appraisal letters.
Number 4. Fort Lauderdale. You turn southeast and follow the Gold Coast, passing luxury towers and aging motels until you reach Fort Lauderdale, the self-styled Venice of America. For decades, Fort Lauderdale was the slightly more relaxed cousin of Miami. Big boats, big condos, big tourism. For investors, it looked like a lower-priced way to tap into the same global demand that drove Miami's boom. Then the cost structure changed. By 2025, the biggest story here is not just price, but overhead. Insurance premiums for waterfront and near-waterfront properties have gone from uncomfortable to shocking. Condo associations are grappling with new inspection rules and reserve requirements. Special assessments are becoming common, and they are not small. Apartment-style condos up and down the beach are sending owners letters with 5-figure or even 6-figure repair obligations. Roof replacements, concrete restoration, structural upgrades. All of it costs more than it did 5 years ago, and none of it can be postponed without serious liability. That burden lands on owners who already stretched to buy in. Some are second homeowners who can pay, many are not. As a result, listings have jumped in certain buildings and neighborhoods. Units that would have sparked bidding wars are now sitting while prospective buyers read through association documents and realize they would be signing up not just for a mortgage, but for years of unpredictable extra bills. The rental side is also pressured. Short-term rental regulations have tightened in parts of the city and county. Properties once run as vacation rentals are being converted to long-term leases or sold off. That adds to active inventory and puts downward pressure on achievable rents. Meanwhile, buyers who are willing to pay Florida premiums are increasingly asking themselves a simple question. If I'm going to take on this amount of risk and cost, should I be in Fort Lauderdale, or should I go a little further north or inland and get more safety for the same money? The water is still beautiful, the lifestyle is still enticing, but in 2025, Fort Lauderdale housing feels less like an easy wealth play and more like a high-stakes calculation where one bad storm or one new assessment can flip the entire equation.
Number 3. Tampa. You cross the state again and roll back into the Tampa Bay metro. This time, not as a sun-struck tourist, but as a forensic accountant of the housing market. Tampa was one of the great winners of the last cycle. No state income tax, a growing job base, and a surge of arrivals from the Northeast and Midwest turned this region into a star of the national housing story. Investors bought single-family homes by the dozen as new subdivisions stretched in every direction. By 2025, the shine is still there, but the numbers underneath are flashing yellow. Recent regional data show active listings well above their pandemic lows. Months of supply have crept toward levels that no longer favor sellers. Price cuts before a sale are now standard. The main culprit is cost of ownership. Insurance premiums in coastal and near-coastal neighborhoods have soared. Some carriers have left, while others narrowed coverage or raised deductibles. Flood insurance adds another layer of expense. Property taxes, reassessed at peak valuations from 2021 and 2022, are slow to fall even as sale prices soften. For many families, the all-in monthly payment on a typical Tampa area home no longer matches local wages. Mortgage payments, taxes, association dues, and insurance together create a number that breaks the budget. That forces hard choices. Some would-be buyers stay renters. Some owners list and leave for cheaper states or less exposed inland metros. Others hang on, cutting every other expense and delaying repairs. Investors are feeling the strain too. Short-term rentals face more competition and, in some zones, tighter rules. Long-term rents are not rising fast enough to keep up with insurance and tax bills. Cash flow that looked solid on a 2022 spreadsheet now looks fragile as premiums reset and rent growth slows. Inland suburbs that once felt like safe spillover zones are also seeing inventory stack up. Builders are offering rate buydowns, closing cost credits, and quiet price reductions. Tampa in 2025 is not collapsing, but it is correcting. Storms, insurance, and stretched affordability do not care about marketing slogans. They care about math. And in more Tampa neighborhoods, that math is finally starting to push back.
Number 2, Naples. You keep heading south until the developments get quieter, the cars get nicer, and the price tags jump into another bracket. Welcome to Naples, the crown jewel of the Gulf Coast wealth corridor. Naples has never really pretended to be affordable. It's a luxury market for retirees, executives, and global money that wants sun, golf, and gated communities. For years, that formula worked almost too well. Prices marched higher. New communities opened with 7-figure starting points. Waterfront properties redefined the word expensive. By 2025, even some of the wealthy are starting to flinch. Insurance in Collier County has entered a new phase. For high-end coastal properties, premiums that used to be annoying are now genuinely shocking. Deductibles are huge, exclusions have multiplied. Even for those who can technically afford the bill, the question becomes whether they want to. Condo associations in older high-rises are also tightening standards. Structural inspections, reserve studies, and code upgrades are revealing decades of deferred maintenance. The result is a wave of multi-year projects funded by special assessments that can easily run into 6 figures per unit. Some owners simply write the check. Others list and walk away, accepting lower sell prices rather than sign up for years of construction and surprise costs. Inventory in certain segments of the Naples market is rising. Ultra-luxury properties are taking longer to move. The buyer pool, once globally deep, is thinner in a world where high rates and volatility are making even the rich more selective. At the same time, the next tier down is squeezed by insurance and assessments that turn dream condos into financial burdens. For traditional single-family neighborhoods a bit inland, there is another issue. Prices ran ahead of what local service workers and mid-level professionals could realistically support. That creates pockets where demand is soft unless sellers adjust expectations. Naples is not turning into a ghost town, but it is showing how far even a wealthy market can push costs before the feedback loop changes. When doctors, attorneys, and business owners start saying, "This is too much for what we get," you know the ceiling is closer than anyone wanted to admit.
Number 1, Miami. You end where the Florida housing myth burned brightest. Miami,
the glossy magazine cover of the state, the place that tried to reinvent itself every decade. During the early 2020s, Miami became the destination for billionaires, founders, and finance executives looking for palm trees instead of gray Manhattan skies. Rents and prices responded like a rocket. Locals were pushed out to the edges or out of the region entirely. By 2025, the reckoning is here. Insurance costs in Miami-Dade County are no longer a side story. They are the story. Homeowners are seeing quotes that rival luxury car payments. Some carriers have left, others have narrowed what they will insure. Flood risk and storm surge projections are not abstractions here, they are line items. Condo towers, especially older ones, are under the microscope. Mandatory inspections, stricter reserves, and remediation orders are revealing structural issues that sat quietly for decades. Associations are levying eye-watering special assessments. Owners who once flaunted waterfront views on social media are now staring at invoices that could wipe out their savings. Meanwhile, speculative money that drove the last boom has vanished. Crypto fortunes shrank. Tech valuations reset. Return-to-office policies pulled some workers back to other cities. International capital, spooked by global instability and local risks, has become more cautious. The result is a city where luxury condos sit on the market longer, where price cuts that would have been unthinkable a few years ago are becoming normal, and where rental concessions are creeping into high-end buildings. At the same time, Miami still faces profound inequality. People who keep the city running often cannot afford to live anywhere near where they work. The gap between the penthouse and the street has never been wider, and that is a stability problem that cannot be solved with marketing. Risk analyses that blend sea-level projections, insurance trends, and city budget stress tests have modeled worst-case scenarios where parts of Miami's high-end housing stock face catastrophic value resets over the next decade. Those are not predictions, they are warnings. Standing on a high balcony overlooking the bay, Miami still feels invincible. But look down, past the glass and the pools, at the rising cost of staying insured, the rising sea, and the shifting tide of global money. The city that sold itself as the ultimate bet on the future is now the place where the future is asking for receipts.
Across Florida, from inland logistics hubs to glittering coastal enclaves, one truth is becoming impossible to ignore. You cannot build an entire housing narrative on endless sunshine, endless in-migration, and endless price gains while ignoring the hard limits of wages, weather, and risk. At some point, the insurance bill arrives. The assessment letter arrives. The buyer pool runs out of people willing or able to pay the old prices. In 2025, that moment is arriving in slow motion across the state. Some markets will bend and recover. Others may break. But every homeowner, every renter, and every investor has a choice. Believe the brochure or believe the math. You have been watching Discover the Nation. If this deep dive into Florida's fragile housing reality helped you see beyond the palm trees and postcard images, tap like, share this video with anyone thinking about buying here, and subscribe so you never have to make a 30-year decision based only on a sales pitch. Tell us in the comments where you are seeing price cuts, empty open houses, or rising insurance in your own neighborhood. We are reading every story and using your experiences to decide where we drive next. Because in this market, information is not just power. In Florida, it might be the only thing standing between you and a very expensive mistake.